Numbers in the Bible is a book that probably makes you think that it's something other than it really is. You think it's just a book of counting. Now, the book of Numbers does begin with a census of the people of Israel, and there'll be another census of the people of Israel later in the book. But that doesn't really describe what it's about. The Hebrew name of the book, Hamidbar, the wilderness, is a much better description for what we find in the book of Numbers. In this, the fourth book of the Bible, fourth book of the Pentateuch or Torah, of the books of Moses. It describes what's going on with Israel as they're about to leave Mount Sinai until they reach the Jordan River, and why it had taken so long, and all kinds of other details in between. Numbers is most certainly written by Moses, who was the one who was a big actor in these stories and who would have written them down very soon after they had happened. This is testified to throughout the New Testament. Numbers is recognized as one of the books of the Torah, inspired by God. We'll see many references to many of the events and people in Numbers as we go throughout the text. The events themselves would have taken place somewhere between 1450 and 1410 BC, if we take all the numbers in the Bible in terms of time periods very seriously. And they would have written down by Moses almost immediately after they happened in his preparations for his death. The book of Numbers, as we're going to see, is going to lay out for us all the things that the Israelites did in the wilderness, why there was this 40-year gap that all of a sudden opens up in the middle of the story, and how it would be that Moses would no longer be their leader once they reached the Jordan River. So Numbers will begin, like we said, with that census, where all the people of Israel will be counted. The Levites are exempted, and there are going to be a separate count for them because they have been dedicated to God. We then are told some of the schematics of what's going on with where the various tribes are placed around the tabernacle, and also what's going on within the Levite camp and the various sons, the numbering and the duties of the Gershonites, Kohathites, and Merariites, or sons of Merari, the various clans there in Levi, and the various tasks and things that they were supposed to be up to. That gets us through chapter 4. And then we have some more laws that are given. We're going to see throughout Numbers, there's all kinds of laws that are just kind of interspersed, sometimes at very awkward moments. But here we have various laws about restitution for sin, an ordeal for jealousy. In chapter 6, especially the Nazirite vow, which would prove very important. Samson will be a Nazirite. John the Baptist seems to evoke everything about the Nazirite vow if he's not a Nazirite himself. And also the importance of fulfilling vows. At the end of chapter 6, we have Aaron's benediction, the high priestly benediction. Yahweh bless you and protect you. Yahweh make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Very important blessing benediction to this day. It's one of the earliest fragments we have of the Bible. We found a little silver scroll from Ketef Hinnom in Israel with this inscribed on it in the old epigraphic Hebrew letters. So very important, compelling thing for a very, very long time. Chapter 7, we see all kinds of offerings being presented by the various tribes to God. It's very elaborately laid out. It's the same offering per tribe, but it's all laid out in exquisite detail. Then in chapter 8, we learn about the separation of the Levites. And in chapter 9, the regulations about the second Passover and how God leads them out by means of the cloud. And then in chapter 10, we begin that journey. Now that's been the second Passover, the year after they've left Egypt. They are now leaving Sinai and heading out further into the wilderness. They get a little bit further out, and now they complain. They complain because they're tired of manna. They want meat. And so Moses is despairing about this. So God then tells him to gather 70 of the elders of Israel. And the spirit of Moses, part of it, was given to these men, and the spirit was upon them. They prophesied. There's two men, Eldad and Medad, who were in the camp, and they also had the spirit come upon them. They start prophesying. Joshua tells Moses to have him knock it off, but Moses would not do so. He wants all of Yahweh's people to be prophets, and the Yahweh would put his spirit upon all of his people. At that time, there would be quail, and all kinds of quail came out of the camp, and the people had all the meat they wanted. And a plague also came out, and they named that place Kibroth Hatava, because of all the cravings that they had. In chapter 12, Aaron and Miriam oppose Moses because he's taking a Cushite wife. We don't quite know what happened to Zipporah. Cushite would have been a black woman of Africa. We don't know why it was such a problem. But God intervenes for Moses, who of course is a very meek man, as we are told here. And Miriam becomes leprous. And they make intercession. And after some time, Miriam is healed of that. And Aaron and Miriam are reminded of where they stand relative to Moses. Now we have the dramatic events of the book of Numbers. To prepare to enter the promised land, God has the Israelites send out spies, one from every tribe. They all go out, they spy out the land of Canaan, they see how great it is, how fertile it is, they bring back some wonderful grapes. But then 10 of them come back and talk about all that, but also mention, oh yeah, and there's Nephilim, they're giants, and we look like grasshoppers in their midst in terms of the people. Joshua and Caleb try to cry out and tell them that no, God will give us this land, God will give us victory over them. But the community all cries out. They all believe the 10 spies. And if they'd only died in the land of Egypt, they cry out in chapter 14, verse 2. And if only we had perished in this wilderness. Why has Yahweh brought us in this land only to be killed by the sword, that our wives and our children should become plunder? Wouldn't it be better for us to return to Egypt? So they said to one another, let us appoint a leader and return to Egypt. That they so despair that they now want to go back to slavery. The idiocy, the insanity of this moment. And yet how tempting it is so many times in the pit of despair for us to want to return to that which led to destruction and death. Moses and Aaron begged for them not to do this. God's going to strike them all dead again, but Moses intercedes for them yet again. But there was now going to be a penalty because of all of this complaining in the wilderness. That generation would not enter the promised land. Their children, those 20 and younger, those who they were convinced would be a prey, they would be the ones who would go in and take the promised land, with the exception of Caleb and Joshua. Then right in the middle of all this, chapter 15, more laws. Rulings about sacrifices, first fruits, unintentional offenses, and the tassels from the sins, tassels that they would wear as well. There's also the man who were gathering sticks on the Sabbath, and it was told that he would be put to death. Then more dramatic events, chapter 16. You see a rebellion against Moses and Aaron, where you have Korah and Dathan and Abiram, and they they come out and they rebel against Moses, and they cry out, you take too much upon yourselves, seeing the whole community is holy, every one of them, and Yahweh's among them. Why do you exalt yourselves above the community of Yahweh? They're rebelling against Moses and Aaron's specific leadership. They're trying to get away from all of the condemnation that they have been speaking, trying to rationalize themselves, since God's in their midst, therefore they must be holy. Very dangerous logic here. There is the test that is set forth. If the ground opens up and swallows Korah, Dathan, Abiram, then it's clear that God has chosen Moses. And they all have censers. They're all standing there. And guess what? The ground opens up and these men are swallowed in. And there is judgment upon all of them. And there's all kinds of plague and devastation and things. Fire goes out and consumes all of the rebels in the situation. And then, that was enough, now the people murmur, saying that Moses and Aaron have killed some of the people of God. And because of that, well, again, Moses has to intercede for them. There's more violence and devastation. There's a plague. 14,700 die in that plague. And now Aaron's authority is being challenged, and there would be a staff from each of the tribal leader. They were all laid out, and it's Aaron's staff that bloomed, that showed all the people that God had chosen Aaron. That staff was put in the ark. And so the people now are concerned that they are going to die if they come near the tabernacle because of all these things that have gone on. And we have seen the story of this great rebellion. Chapter 18, we got more instructions, responsibilities regarding the Levites and priests. They are laid out. There's the red heifer ritual in chapter 19, and also how they can purify themselves from uncleanness. In chapter 20, we have what seems to be the acceleration. Everything before this point seems to have referred to the time immediately after they left the Sinai area, that second year since they left Egypt. And all of a sudden now, it seemed that we have now moved up in time. At no point in Numbers does it say, hey, the 40 years have passed. But it seems about this time, because Miriam dies in the wilderness of Zin in Kadesh. There's more complaints about not having water. which is common. Moses and Aaron are very frustrated by this. God tells them to speak to the rock, and water will come forth. But what does he say in verse 10? Listen, you rebels, must we bring water out of this rock for you? And Moses, in his anger, strikes the rock. Moses has now become frustrated, despair. We can understand this. But now he's gone too far. Now he is a danger to himself, to the Israelites, to God. And that is why Yahweh spoke to them and said, because you do not trust me enough to show me as holy before the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land I have given them. And these are the waters of Meribah. This is what in Psalm 95 will be the they will not enter my rest condemnation, which the Hebrews author will grab a hold of in chapter 4 to talk about how they did not enter God's rest, that rest is now granted for us in Christ in our death and resurrection. At this point, they're to enter the land of Edom. The Edomites refuse to let them in, so they have to go around Edom. And at Mount Hor is where Aaron dies, and his son Eleazar is made high priest in his place. There's a king of the Canaanites who come out and fight against them, and they are destroyed. But then in chapter 21, as they're going around the land of Edom, they get mad again at the people. People get mad again as usual. And now all of a sudden God sends venomous snakes out against them. I know it says fiery serpents in a lot of Bibles. They're fiery serpents not because they're on fire, but because when they bite you, you feel like you're on fire because you're suffering from the venom. Many of the people die because of this. They cry out to God. God tells Moses to make a bronze serpent that they can all look at, and they look on it. When they've been bitten, they will not suffer the ill effects of the venom. This will eventually be called Nehushtan. It will have to be destroyed in the days of Hezekiah because it's become something that people have bowed down to and made an idol out of. And this is what Jesus is evoking in John chapter 3 when he says, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up. Now they have reached the land of Moab, or near the land of Moab, and they want to pass through the land of the Amorites, Sihon and Og, and they don't let them through. In fact, they fight against them. And Sihon and Og are thoroughly defeated. Completely defeated, wiped out, so that now the Israelites are on land not Moabite, not Ammonite, sitting right there east of the Jordan River. And chapter 22, we see that Balak, king of Moab, and watch, is not very happy about this. And so he hires Balaam, who is a well-known prophet of God, who speaks blessings and cursings. He wants to hire him to curse the Israelites. And Balaam at first will not go to him because, well, God told him not to. But then Balak sends even greater people, so Balaam said, all right, I will go. And then we got this great moment in chapter 22, where Balaam's on his donkey, and all of a sudden his donkey stops, because the donkey has seen the angel of Yahweh in front of him. That angel, in fact, is called the Satan angel. It is the adversarial angel, the adversary in front of him. And so Balaam's frustrated, starts beating his donkey, wants him to move. All of a sudden, the Spirit inspires the donkey to speak, which must have been very awkward for Balaam. Having a conversation with his donkey, who's asking him why he's doing this. And there's probably a reason why he stopped, right? And all of a sudden, Balaam now sees the angel of Yahweh and understands why his donkey has not moved, and learns that, in fact, had it not been for his donkey's faithfulness, he would have died, but is strongly warned, you shall not do anything but speak what God tells you to speak. And so Balak has Balaam stand in front of Israel in 3 different places, and every single time Balaam opens his mouth, blessings come out in chapter 23 and 24, not curses. This happens 4 times. Balak is very, very mad. Now, it's not said explicit in the text, but we get the implicit nature of from other passages, is that Balaam now will tell Balak what to really do, that God's not going to curse them this way, that if they really want Israel to be messed up, induce the Israelites to serve other gods. And that's what you see in chapter 25, where the people begin to associate and have relations with Moabite and Midianite women, and they start serving Baal of Peor. This is why Balaam will become what the character he is in 2 Peter 2, and Jude 1, and in Revelation 2, this character that kind of induces the people of God into sin through idolatry and things of that nature. Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of the high priest, who is the grandson of Aaron, sees a prominent Israelite and taking in one of these Midianite women into his tent right in front of all the Israelites. And he goes and takes a spear and he runs through both of them. And there was a plague that was then going on, and the plague killed 24,000. And then God said to Moses that Phinehas, son of Eleazar, has turned my anger away from the Israelites when he manifested such zeal for my sake among them, and so I did not consume the Israelites in my zeal. Thus Phinehas was going to be the next high priest, and the line would continue through him. because of his zeal, and the example of that zeal would become very prominent throughout the rest of Israelite history, for better and sometimes for worse. At this time, the second census takes place, and you can see the difference in numbers of various tribes. Some have reduced, some are increased over the 40-year period, and provisions are made for the division of the land and separate places for the Levites. We then have inheritance laws given in terms of the daughters of Zelophehad and the fact that he died, but he has daughters, and how are they going to inherit? That yes, they would have inheritance. Then Moses said Joshua is going to lead the people, so there's kind of a handing over of the authority here. Then we have 28 offerings, various offerings for the various events in Israelite history and all the various observances. The blowing of the trumpets, the Day of Atonement, things of that nature in chapter 29. Chapter 30 will describe vows and how vows are to be handled. Then in chapter 31, we have war against the Midianites that God had commanded because of the events of Baal Peor, in which the Israelites go out, slaughter all kinds of Midianites, including Balaam, and they bring back all kinds of spoil. Moses is very mad because they haven't slaughtered the women who have laid with men, so they are then slaughtered, and gifts are then given to the tabernacle and also among those who had not gone out and fought, but had watched the baggage, things of that nature, and they had to be purified after the battle. Then in chapter 32, we see that the Reubenites, Gadites, and some of the Manassites really like the land they're on, like that land of the Amorites of Sihon and Og there, but on the eastern side of the Jordan River, and they want to stay there. Moses gets mad at them, acting as if they're going to try to hamper the zeal of the rest of the Israelites to go across and to do the work God had told them to do. But the men promise they will go across and help conquer the land for their brothers, and then would come back to this land. Moses concedes to this, and this is why you will have some of the tribes of Israel on the eastern side of the Jordan River. The Reubenites, the Gadites, and some of the Manassites will live here on the eastern side. Then Moses will set forth in chapter 33 the various wanderings that they had done to get to the point at which they're at now, at the river, Mount Nebo, in front of Canaan. And then the boundaries are set forth, and also the provision is made for the Levitical cities in chapter 35, the cities of that the cities of Levites will live in, and also the cities of refuge. If somebody commits involuntary manslaughter, he can flood to one of the cities of refuge. The case will be adjudicated. If it is found that he did commit involuntary manslaughter, he can stay there until the next time of the high priest and can return, and there would be no justification for the avenging of blood guilt upon him. Chapter 36, the stars of Zelophehad are back, mostly because the people of Gilead that are concerned about, okay, if they marry outside their clan and tribe, that we're going to lose some of our inheritance. And so Moses says they need to marry within their clan. Again, weird situational law. It's there because these situations would come up, and it's important to balance both the fact that even daughters, if that's all they have, should inherit the land, but the land does need to stay within clans and tribes so that some don't take the land of others. And these, we're told in Numbers 36 and verse 13, are the commandments and decisions Yahweh commanded Israelites through the authority of Moses in the Rift Valley Plains by Moab along the Jordan River opposite Jericho. And thus we have the book of Numbers, which seems like nothing like what it's named. It's a book that tells us what Israel is going through. Very easy to look at Israel in the wilderness and point our fingers, right? Of all the terrible things they're doing, why are they doing this? They should be following God, being more faithful to God. It's important to point that finger back. How are we tempted to be like the Israelites when things get difficult and rough, when we are in the wilderness of our lives, so to speak? How do we find ourselves tempted to grumble and complain against God or imagine God's not there with us so we don't act like Israel did in the wilderness? And of course, so many stories that will become very important throughout Scripture and in fact throughout time. Thus is the book of Numbers. May we all seek to serve and glorify God in Christ and obtain the resurrection of life in Him. We're so glad that you've joined us. If you have any questions or comments about anything we've described here in the book of Numbers, let us know in our conversation, in how you found us, so we can continue that conversation and be of encouragement to you. I'm Ethan with Adventist Church of Christ. We are disciples making disciples of Los Angeles. If you can be of any further service, if you'd like Bible study, you have prayer requests, if you just want to meet with us, any way we can encourage you, let us know at AdventistChurchOfChrist.org. You can find us on all kinds of social media at normally Adventist Church. We again thank you. May the Lord bless and keep until we meet again.